We have a couple of things to sort out here first. One of them is that through my own negligence, I didn't end up in the program with any kind of description about who I am. So I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. My wife Marion and I own Sleepy Hollow Bed and Breakfast in Gananoque, the Thousand Islands. We've spent a lot of time there in the last 14 years, and we like to refer to Gananoque as paradise. We have 1,847 islands in the St. Lawrence. We have boat tours. We have, and it's a destination, a tourist destination by virtue of having some of those things. So Marion and I are in our 14th year with our bed and breakfast. It's a 1905 mansion with 7 bedrooms for guests and even one for us. So the other thing that sort of got in the way just a little while ago is that I'm on day 24 of getting a total knee replacement, so that sort of took a little bit of time and effort and took me away from sitting at the computer trying to do some of the things that I should have done. So we are a little bit different than a lot of bed and breakfast in that most of you don't have 7 rooms. Marion and I do this all ourselves. She looks after the upstairs, I look after the kitchen, and it seems to work so far. And I'm here today to tell you what Brian Skipper and I worked on getting some information together on Airbnb and how that might impact our business. And as soon as you say Airbnb, most of you, I think, will throw up your hands and say, oh, no, I'm not interested. However, just as an example, in the Wall Street Journal in June this past year, there were, according to the Wall Street Journal, there were 30,000 places to sleep in Paris. 30,000 listings for Paris, France. So it's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. However, maybe what we should do is apply to the government, get a $1 billion grant, and buy them out. I'm sure that we could put together an idea like that. We have had a considerable number of meetings with various levels of Ontario government. The Chamber of Commerce put on a seminar that I attended in Toronto, and it basically was revolving around the shared economy. There was a lot of talk about Uber and a lot of talk about Airbnb. The people that attended that seminar, I was surprised at the end when we looked at where these people were from, that a considerable number, probably a third of the people that were there were from the Ontario government, one ministry or another. So they're all looking with trepidation in some cases at what Airbnb is about and what Uber is about and why it's working. And the thing is that the people who are the important side of this equation, our customers and guests, they're the ones that are driving this because they like it. I was really surprised when I talked to our kids. We have 3 kids and in various parts of the world, and all of them have been, one way or another, connected to Airbnb and Uber. In fact, when I was in San Francisco visiting our oldest son last year, we used Uber to get from their place at 5:30 in the morning to the airport. And it worked pretty well. So based on those kinds of experiences, it's again something that is, again, not going to go away. It's something that we should be cognizant of what some of the facts are. So 800, now this information is a little bit outdated because there are more than 800,000 listings in that many cities and that many countries. they're well funded in terms of the amount of money that they're talking about. When we met with Aaron, the country manager for Airbnb in Canada, he said that they have a huge war chest to fight any kind of opposition that is mounted on Airbnb. So any kind of regulation, any kind of change in the requirements for Airbnb to operate, they're going to fight. And they have enough money to win it, whether it's the Ontario government or the federal government. So their attitude, first of all, is that B&Bs don't matter, because that's not who they're looking for, and that if they have challenges, they will fight them to the last breath. For that reason, we would really like to, even more than we have in the past, we would like the Ontario government to adopt our definition of what a B&B is. I won't quote it, you know exactly what it is, but there are some key points in it, one of them being that it's an owner-operated building, residential building. So we live in the B&B, you live in your B&B, and that part of it is not at all like Airbnb or any of the things that Airbnb have. So of the thousands and thousands of listings in Airbnb, they go from anything from entire homes, apartments, teepees, igloos, private islands. And I mean, I know from our own experience, even in Gananoque, that there are people just down our street that are listed on Airbnb that are circumventing the fire regulations and the parking regulations that are imposed on us as B&Bs registered with the town. So those kinds of things are concerns. And one of the things that I did, and you might consider the same thing, is look to find out who in your immediate area is listed on Airbnb and send that list of places and addresses. You know, you can't get the address because they don't put their address on the Airbnb listing. They rely on you, the guest, first of all, making a booking, and then they tell them where to go. That's not the way it is. They don't tell them where to go, they tell them how to find you. So providing that list of local establishments that are listed on Airbnb and sending that to the local fire chief might evoke some inspections that might be helpful. And I don't think that I'm concerned about the competition. I am only concerned that the safety and quality assurance that the guest is looking for is found. So I don't mind that there's another guy down the street offering a bed. That doesn't bother me a bit. I think we can compete on their level without any problem. But I think that it should be safe and the quality of the experience should be beneficial to the guest. At the conference in Toronto with the Chamber of Commerce, when I had an opportunity to ask the question of the Airbnb representative there, so where is the breakfast? She couldn't answer that question because for the most part, they don't offer breakfast. And why they came up with Airbnb as a name, I don't know. But I think that's a huge benefit to us because you almost can't open a newspaper now and not find something about Airbnb. And if it's Airbnb, the thing that happens is that they've got this thought in their mind that B&B is bed and breakfast. Everybody knows B&B is bed and breakfast. So I think that irrespective of our first reaction, our second reaction is the opportunity that we're getting more publicity now as B&Bs than we had before. We just have to find ways of capitalizing on that and making sure that that we present an image of safe, secure, inspected, star rated, whatever it happens to be, and make sure that that image is conveyed. The thing about it here is that we've got all kinds of activity from the United States, 10 million bookings. I mean, we don't need that many. We just need a few. So one of the things that I think we should all do is what I have done. And in March, after all of this discussion about Airbnb and after this Chamber of Commerce thing, I went back and I said, well, if I'm going to really investigate this, I should sign up so that I know how this thing is working. Two immediate drawbacks were evident. There's no way to communicate directly with the guest. It's a piggyback system. Your email goes to Airbnb, Airbnb send it to the guest, and it comes back. So it's really tough to get a full understanding of who it is that's coming. Lots of people and discussions in previous years were that I want to talk to the people who are coming to stay in my house so I'm not even interested in online booking because I don't get to talk to the people. This is even worse from the standpoint that there's no opportunity to communicate in any way directly with the guest, and you often don't find out things until they actually arrive. The reservation tells you how many people are coming, and it tells you how much they're paying. And that almost is all there is. So registering, you can only register one room. So back to the other situation where it said you have a whole house, you have a couch in the corner, you have whatever, the teepee. That's easy if there's only one. In our case, we have 7 rooms, so I only put on one listing, which meant that it was only one price. And so I picked one room. You add the tax in because they want a net price. And I put that one room up on Airbnb. When the potential guest, gets in touch the first time, they say, we have 5 people. Well, the 5 people won't fit in that queen bed. So I have to then go back to them and say, the price and the room that you've selected is only good for 2 people, and you're going to need 3 rooms, and these are the rooms that are best, and this is the total price, not just the price that is on Airbnb. The way around that is to list every single room separately, as a separate individual listing for each of the rooms that you have. I thought that would be much more confusing and difficult to manage, so I didn't do that. And it's worked out fine. But the key to doing this, if you decide to actually go and put the listing on Airbnb, describe in great detail what it is that you offer. The more detail you have in that listing, the easier it is to clarify with the guest what it is they're going to expect. So, and this was one of the functions that was suggested by Aaron at Airbnb. He said, individual listing, list each of the rooms that you have. But I just found that with Booking.com and with BedandBreakfast.com and BB Canada, we don't list individual rooms. It's just our B&B. So in the case of Booking.com, it is listing by room. So I just took that sort of model and moved it over. The important thing here is that if you decide to do that, go and look at some of the other B&Bs that are listed on Airbnb and look at the descriptions that they have and try to come up with something that is very definitive. Like, first of all, I mentioned that we are a licensed, approved bed and breakfast, that we provide a breakfast with for every guest that's there. Again, those kinds of things normally you don't find on Airbnb. So trying to describe who you are on Airbnb is a critical step. One of the offshoots of what we have done is that we went to AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and we asked them how we could get in touch with all the municipalities, because the cross-section of Ontario in terms of bed and breakfast regulations changes for each municipality. I'm sure you all know what the rules are for your own municipality, and in the case of Niagara and Stratford, those regulations are about that thick, if I remember correctly. So the issue is that you want to make sure that you understand what those regulations are before you open your B&B, and trying to get that information out to the various municipalities. We wrote a piece that showed up in the newsletter that goes out to all the municipalities from the Association of Ontario Municipalities. We wrote a piece that talked about this issue and why we need to have a definition, why we need to have some standardization across the province. Didn't get much reaction from that, but I think that it's not a message that once will be enough. We need to go back and do that a few more times. We've had discussions with North Bay, Wasaga Beach, and Hamilton. And in the case of Hamilton, their regulation is that they have an inspection process. There's a fee of some $200 for the municipality to go out and inspect the B&B. And the individual that is responsible for redrafting this new bylaw suggested that after we had talked to them and given them our criteria and what we do and why FOBBA and what our definition is and what somebody has to go through to be a member, they said if somebody came to us and was going to apply and they were members of FOBBA, we wouldn't inspect them, we wouldn't charge them any money. So Hamilton is a good example at this point of how we'd like to see the rest of the province. So Aaron Zifkin, the Canadian country manager, we met with him, and basically they were not interested in B&Bs. They were only interested on mom and pop that are going south for 3 months and they want to rent out their condo or home. That's the market that he described as being their key market. They're not really, and in fact, we had to explain to Aaron what a B&B was from our perspective. It's again, we raised the question, where's the breakfast? And you know, that didn't compute. So he suggested rooms being listed individually. I'm not sure that that's a really good answer because it creates some extra work and extra management at your end. If you only have 2 rooms, maybe that's not quite so difficult. They asked operators and people that are listing properties on their website to comply with local regulations, but there's no follow-up and there's no requirement from their point of view. If you're listed and they've asked you to comply, that's the end of the story. They're not interested in whether you did comply or whether you are breaking any rules. So in Quebec, the legislation is much closer to being passed. I'm not sure exactly where that's at the moment, but we know that Quebec has a much more stringent approach to this whole thing, and they already have a fairly comprehensive system of rating B&Bs in Quebec. Although last night I heard a story about a Quebec B&B that wasn't so hot because they're not even listed on the official listing. Needless to say, those kinds of things are going to happen no matter where you are. one of the things that is interesting in the current information that has been in the press is that 2 states in the United States, Washington or DC, and I can't remember the other one, have made arrangements with Airbnb that Airbnb would pay the appropriate taxes to those jurisdictions that would normally be assessed to the B&B. So if somebody makes a reservation through Airbnb in those jurisdictions, Airbnb will pay the tax directly to the state. Now, wouldn't that be nice if Ontario collected the HST for all the listings that are in Ontario? Don't hold your breath, but that's one of the things that we maybe should be continuing to work on. Recommendations and reviews. I mean, the guest stays at your B&B from an Airbnb listing, and then as soon as they leave, you get an email from Airbnb saying, please rate this guest. And I think there are 3 different boxes to fill in. One of them that goes to the guest, one of them that becomes public, and one of them that is private only to Airbnb. So you can say, what a wonderful guest in this section, and this person was terrible, and the other. Not a bad idea. But that approach means that there are reviews of your B&B, and you get to review the guests so that when you get a potential guest coming to ask about accommodation, you can look up and see what previous hosts have said about that guest. So there's a little bit of information that you can glean. The payment is made by Airbnb according to how you've got your room listed. They pay that amount, and they pay it directly into your bank account. No checks, no mail, no difficulties. It arrives, or it's sent the day after, the day the guest leaves, and usually it's 2 days, sometimes it's even the next day that it's in your bank account. So that's a good thing. The other thing that's not too clear, this 6 to 12% commission isn't quite accurate, because what Airbnb does is Airbnb charges a booking fee to the guest of something in that 6 to 12%. What we pay is closer to 3%, and the 3% is really only for the costs involved in transferring that money from their bank account to ours. So it's not that bad from that standpoint. Insurance. The guest doesn't get any insurance, but the host does. So if, for instance, that horror story in Calgary where they trashed the house, the people had to move out for 3 months or 4 months, and it was $200,000 worth of damage, I think. That Airbnb has said they will cover. In the case of renting out your whole house, there are some other issues that come up. One of them being somewhere in here, they talk about that. One of the points was that they, if they have your whole house, they have access to everything that's in your house. So they can maybe jimmy open the file cabinet, they can get your passport, they can get your credit card numbers, whatever. So identity theft and Airbnb is a concern. I rather think that in most cases where we are living in the house and we're resident in the house when the guest is there, that's not going to be as big a factor as people who rent out their whole house and disappear and come back to who knows what. So I don't really think that's as big a concern as as the fire code issues, the safety of guests, and making sure that that the guest experience is positive. So places that have high populations are definitely going to be more places where Airbnb is popular, as is evidenced with 30,000 listings in Paris. And that, by the way, is the biggest, the largest number of B&B destinations of any city in the world is Paris. The descriptions I've talked about, communications and problems, and if you put an email address in the communication that goes back to the guest or a URL, their software deletes it immediately. They take it out and put in URL removed. And so there's no way that the guest can find your website through Airbnb. They give you 24 hours to respond to an inquiry. So if somebody sends a request, sends an email request, it's in your best interest to respond quickly, because if they don't get a response right away, they'll go somewhere else. But that's the same as we're used to already. People will send out 5 emails and wait for the first one to come back. Language difficulties. When you send a message to the potential guest, it gets translated into whatever language they initiated the request with. Not bad, but Google Translate, as we probably already know, is not 100% perfect, and there's still some difficulties in terms of trying to interpret what it is they're asking for. This is the room cost. This is the room cost with the tax. So we've got $800 worth of rentals and $904. With Booking.com, you pay 15%. So that's what you get. With Airbnb, you get this much, and there's an extra $100 there that you get. I'm not suggesting for a minute that we should all abandon Booking.com, because there are some real benefits there, especially geographically. Booking.com is much more prevalent in Europe. So if you're looking for European guests, Booking.com is a good place to be. As Sean said yesterday, being on every channel that makes sense to you is a good thing. We're on Booking.com, we're on Airbnb, we're on bedandbreakfast.com, we're on BB Canada, we're on probably 30 others that I don't even know about. Having been doing this for 14 years, your information tends to get gobbled up by any number of places. In fact, I just discovered the other day that we're on Trivago. I don't want any part of that, but I'm there anyway. Not because I wanted to be there, but because they're picking up listings from other places and just putting you on. The fact that we are in a position where we insist on things like master business license, that we pay our taxes and we abide by the local fire marshal regulations, the local fire department inspections, all of these things help us be better destinations for the guest. So tax revenue, whether it be HST or destination marketing funds, those things are being lost with Airbnb to the municipalities and the province and the federal government. Violation of lease terms, there have been examples where people have been expelled so that they could take that apartment that they were getting X number of dollars for, put it on Airbnb and get more. And the Landlord and Tenant Act doesn't apply to short-term rentals like this. So people who have had difficulties renting a particular apartment in a particular spot, a low rental building, all of a sudden becomes a high rental building for the landlord, because they can put any price they want on it. So zoning violations, inspections, fire, occupancy permits, insurance, all of those things are concerns with Airbnb, but because we collectively abide by all these rules, it's not a bad place to be. So the issues are, I think we've probably covered most of these, but vandalizing a host residence, identity theft where somebody has full reign of your house. In the case of Calgary, they found that locked rooms were broken into. Who knows what they might be planning on doing in your residence. Your neighbors will not be really happy if a meth lab is next door. Well, maybe they might, I'm not sure. It depends on how much they want to use. So the OMB approved a ban on short-term rentals for homeowners outside designated areas. And in fact, when we were talking to North Bay, one of their initial thoughts was that bed and breakfast should be in the industrial section where the factories were. You know, like, I mean, where does that fit into what we understand a bed and breakfast to be? There's more choice because there are thousands of listings. Low cost because they don't have to pay taxes. Accommodation types, again, from igloos to tree houses and beyond. It's easy to access. I mean, all you need is a smartphone and you can dial it up in 20 seconds and have a place to stay tonight, tomorrow night, whatever. The demographic that this appeals to is not our demographic, but all the 20-something, 30-something folks are really into that. They all have smartphones. They all know how to manipulate I mean, all you have to do is look at any street. The kids that are walking down the street are not even looking where they're going. Every once in a while you see one of them walk into the lamppost. but that ease of access and meeting individual needs when they perceive this to be better for them are the things that we're faced with. We need to be sure that we're in those places, that we have as many channels open as possible. And I fully understand the people who say, I don't want any part of it. But unless we can come up with a couple of $1 billion to fight them, it's going to be there. So in some cases, when we were talking to Hamilton, I talked to a former B&B owner who said, it's all well and good that they have a bylaw for bed and breakfast, but it hasn't been enforced for the last 5 years. If you phone and try to get the bylaw enforcement officer to go and visit, they don't. So having the regulation is not the be-all and the end-all. It's going to be even a little more than that. But I really think that more often than not, the fire department is going to be in a much better position to take exception with some of the things that are happening in some of the listings on Airbnb. So if you don't know your local fire chief, go talk to him or her. There's no way that Airbnb is going to list us separately. At least that was the opinion that Aaron had. We're not going to be able to have our star rating system the way BB Canada does for us. That's never is a long time, but it's not likely that that's ever going to happen. So we need to sort of approach it in a different way. So we'll continue discussions with the people that matter, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the bylaw officers, the Ministry of Tourism. In some cases, other ministries might be involved. The standard definition for a B&B is something that we'll continue to strive for, and even to the point of trying to find a comprehensive list of bylaws that already exist in Ontario. There are lots of places that don't have a bylaw that talks about B&Bs. There are some B&B operators that have been operating for years and years, and there's no regulation per se in their municipality. In the case of one potential B&B operator, the first approach was, well, you're going to have to pay us $10,000 in order to open your B&B. And eventually it got watered down a fair bit, but Bev can tell you the whole story. Voluntary versus mandatory industry regulation, well, there are pros and cons for both of those. Voluntary means that there will be some people who don't. Mandatory means that we might have to do some things that we don't want to do, that we have never done in our B&B history. But the essence of it is that some of those things will happen. And that's the end.